Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 26. I am your host, Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan, and this is the world's very first podcast fully 100% dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, and tradition of wooden boats. Welcome back to the show this week, folks. It is March 15th. Wow, spring is next week, so I'm pretty happy about that. I'd love to get some sun going here in Arlington. It's been a little bit wet. Anyway, thanks for tuning in today. Our featured segment today is an interview with Jeffrey and Christine Smith. And Jeffrey and Christine Smith have a wooden vessel that they restored called the David B. And it's essentially a floating bed and breakfast. And in the interview, they're going to tell you all about that boat and the restoration and a bunch of cool stuff. So stick around for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. I always say it's going to be a lot of fun, right? Hopefully it is usually most of the time, or you wouldn't be tuning in today. So I'd love it if you would connect with me. My latest fun thing is pinterest.com/woodenboatdan. And there I've got an event board up telling about upcoming wooden boat events. And there's actually quite a few of them, especially in my area here in the Pacific Northwest, but other locations too. I'll just mention a few here. July 28th to 29th in Nova Scotia is the Wooden Boat Reunion. July 2nd to 4th here in Seattle is the Lake Union Wooden Boat Festival put on by the Center for Wooden Boats. April 20th to 22nd is the Biotech Wooden Boat Show in Louisiana. Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival, September 7th to 8th, 7th to 9th, 2012. There's one in Lake Tahoe, one in Portland, Oregon. Anyway, go to my event site there and you can see what's coming up. It's pretty fun. You can also sign up for my email subscription list on my homepage by clicking the button there and giving me your name and email address. And I am going to be sending out to my email subscribers this week a couple really cool videos about building Viking ships. And I know I said I would do that during last week's show. I said I would do it this week, and I am going to still do it this week. So that's going to be coming out. So if you haven't already, sign up for my email list. That would be awesome. You can email me, dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com, or you can leave a comment on my website, hookedonwoodenboats.com. And also on Facebook and Twitter, I'm on there as Wooden Boat Dan. Or you can call my voicemail feedback hotline at 424-261-2360. This week's listener feedback is from Dan Allegrini in Brazil. And Dan left a comment on my blog a few days ago. Here's what he had to say. Hi, Dan. Just a quick note to let you know that I am hooked on your addictive podcasts. It is a sheer pleasure to listen to it while commuting to and from work in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and I always find myself anxious for the next episode. About 3 years ago, my family and I moved to live by one of Sao Paulo's reservoirs, which is over 6,500 acres of water surface, a known center for freshwater sailing, and I have been toying around with the idea of building a boat since then. I do a lot of woodworking in my spare time, and I am fascinated by the look and feel of wooden boats, so I guess building a wooden boat is my natural choice and also my next big pet project. I hope to start cutting timber for a mid-sized wooden sailboat by June or July 2012, Meanwhile, I am trying to get acquainted with the idea of a 3 to 4 commitment with the project. That's it. Keep up the fantastic work. Cheers from Brazil, Dan. Hey, thanks for your feedback, Dan. I really appreciate it. It's a blast to know that there's people on the other side of the world that are liking the podcast and the interviews and what I'm doing. It makes it worthwhile. So very, very good. Let me know what you decide to build for your boat. Be curious. You say you're going to cut your own lumber. So that'll make it an interesting project. Do your own sawmill and dry your lumber and all that stuff. Sounds like a lot of fun. So thanks again, Dan. Appreciate it. If you go to my website now, you'll notice on the right-hand side near the top there is a button there, an advertisement for Jamestown Distributors. And so the deal is I've entered into an affiliate marketing relationship with them. They are a company in the Midwest that sells products for boat building and all kinds of boating stuff. And they've got epoxies, and they've got fiberglass cloth, and they've got paint, and they've got maintenance supplies, electronics, tools, fasteners, all kinds of stuff, probably everything you would need to build a wooden boat. And the scoop is, if you click on that advertisement on my website, it takes you to their site, and if you order a product there, I get paid a small commission on that if you make a purchase actually within 30 days of clicking on the link on my website. So if you're going to be buying some supplies and you want to help support the show a little bit, I would appreciate it if you would use that link to make some purchases. And I will keep you posted on how that goes. My plan long term is to add a few more advertisers to the site of companies and businesses that have products and services related to wooden boats and what I'm talking about. So it'll just be a natural thing there. It won't be something weird like, advertising, gardening supplies on a wooden boat site or something goofy like that. I want to keep it relevant to what I'm doing, and eventually would like to generate a little bit of income from the website. Okay, I think that's it for the advertisements. We're going to move on to the interview with Jeffrey and Christine Smith from the David B. Let's go ahead and start that. Take it away, guys. So it is March 2nd, 2012, and I am sitting in the settee. Is that what this is officially called?
Yeah.
Okay, of the David B. with Christine and Jeffrey Smith of Northwest Navigation. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great to be here today. Thanks for taking the time to meet with me. Let me start with asking you guys kind of what your background is, where you're from, and how you originally got into boating.
I learned about boats when I was little. I was actually in the Optimist sailing program as a kid.
Okay.
And learned to sail when I was about 10. I grew up in Ohio. I learned to sail in a thing that's called a borrow pond. It's where they take earth to make an overpass in very flat areas of the country. Mm-hmm. So on either side of the freeway, they dig these exactly rectangular ponds and use the earth to make the overpasses. And I learned to sail in one of those. And when I owned a couple small boats between then and through college. And then at some point, I guess when I was 22, I got my first job working on a Windjammer on the coast of Maine.
Okay.
And I started out as a deckhand on a boat that was 90 feet on deck, 125 or 130 overall, and a two-masted schooner that was built to carry passengers in the Maine Windjammer fleet. Mm-hmm. And worked my way up from there.
So how did you get there originally? What compelled you to go back and do that?
I'd actually worked in Michigan on this island that between my freshman and sophomore year of college at University of Cincinnati, I went to work on this island in Michigan. It's a tourist place, and lots of college kids work there.
The island in Lake
called
Superior or
no,
something?
it's between the upper and lower part of Michigan.
Okay.
It's actually in Lake Huron.
Okay.
It's called Mackinac Island,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a pretty famous Midwestern tourist destination.
Yeah.
And there are lots of college kids that work there. It's a great summer job. And I met a guy there who ran a little tour boat, little sailboat business where he was taking people out for classes, and they'd learn to sail with him, and that seemed like a great thing to do. And he encouraged me to work on boats and get a license, and gave me some good advice about making sure that when I did work on boats, whenever it was, wherever it was, that I was able to document it, so that as soon as I had enough time to get a license, I was there getting it.
Oh, really?
A lot of people work, 5 or 10 years and suddenly decide they want to go sit for their license, and
For the captain's license?
yeah, for their captain's
Okay.
license, and aren't able to document all those days that they did in various
wow.
places. And so early on, he said,
Good for him.
make sure
huh?
you can document everything as you get it.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that was good. And so the next summer, I moved with a group of people who had worked on Mackinac, moved with them to the East Coast, and then the following year ended up getting a summer job as a deckhand out there. Worked in some restaurants and did some construction and stuff like that, but then I
Yeah.
ended up getting a deckhand job.
Yeah.
And those boats, they're all wooden, and they take a huge amount of maintenance, so the crew always starts a couple months before the sailing season and does all the small maintenance stuff and all the painting and varnishing. But also, depending on what's going on, you end up getting involved in a lot of bigger projects too, because all of them have occasional plank repair and that kind of stuff to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked my way up from being a deckhand to being the mate on another boat, and then ended up working on the Great Lakes for a couple seasons. First as the mate and relief captain on a schooner there, and then as the captain the following year.
Wow.
And that in between those 2 years, there was also a huge rigging project on that schooner. It got a new set of masts, new top masts, I think all new booms and gaffs, new bowsprit, and we did all that rigging. And because we had the shop set up to do it, we also did all new rail cap and taffrail and stuff. So it was a huge project.
Wow.
There
So who
that I
built
was-
all the spars then? Did you guys build the spars?
Yeah, they were all done right there, and I was involved for part of the project. The second part of it, getting it all back together and onto the boat and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
all that kind of rigging stuff.
Wow.
And then after that, I moved out to the west, and I knew that I wanted to be out here. My family had vacationed out here every summer, and so I lived in Portland for a while and ran a tour boat up and down the Columbia
Oh, really?
for a season, and then moved to Bellingham and got a job running a little tour boat that goes back and forth. Used to go back and forth to Victoria from Bellingham in the summertime,
Mm-hmm.
and did some other things. Worked for a schooner that sails out of here. Worked as the mate and occasionally as the captain for them, and worked for a tugboat company for a little while. But all that time, knew that what I'd seen on those windjammers on the coast of Maine was something that I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
Where the owner, the captain, is the owner, and you get to meet the people. You get to really talk to them over the course of a week and show them a lot of wildlife, and
Yeah.
the business supports
Cool.
these historic boats. So.
Yeah, right. So, Christine, how about your background? Where are you from?
Well, I grew up in Bellevue and
okay.
moved up to Western to go to school in 1990.
Oh,
And I had no experience with boats. My family was more into downhill skiing, so I did a lot of skiing as a kid. And then pretty much my only boating experience was water skiing with the family. Some friends had sailboats, and that was all. And then it wasn't until I met Jeffrey that the boating thing kind of happened. So
yeah.
we when we met him, one of the things that my friends who kind of got us together had suggested was that they kind of knew that I wanted to someday run a bed and breakfast. And
So why did you want to do that? I'm just curious.
I have no idea why I wanted to do that. But it was always one of those kind of romantic ideas. Like,
Really?
wow, this is what I want to do. I want to live out in the San Juan Islands, and I want to run a bed and breakfast, and I can cook, and I'll have a little garden, and I'll tend to my little garden. And all
Nobody's
that.
ever asked you why.
Yeah, I know.
You come up with that, it just covers for it. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, of course you wanted that.
Yeah. That's what I've always wanted to do. So, and I always sort of had this draw to hospitality. Even as a kid, I was always the one who wanted to cook. I was always the one who would put on the dinners for the families, and I'd even make my own birthday cakes. So it was it was always that kind of stuff that I really loved to do, and so in the back of my mind I wanted to do that. But it was always one of those things that was a dream. Like, I had no real plan to do that at all.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of was in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
And so I had graduated from Western. I have a degree in anthropology. When I met Jeffrey, and I was working for a photographer outside of Bellingham, and then we met, and he said that running a bed and breakfast would be really cool, but did it really have to have a foundation to it? Could it float? And I was like, oh, that could be good. so anyhow, I kept so we kept seeing each other after that, and that was our first night that we met.
Oh, really?
And
what year was that?
1996.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was the night before his birthday.
You agree with that, Jeffrey?
Oh, yeah.
It was 96? Okay. You were kind of quiet on that one.
No, it's a true story. Every word of it.
Yeah, so at one point, right after we met, he was showing me some lines of a boat that he sort of wanted to build someday. And and so that was kind of my first experience with boats, and we stayed together, and then started seriously thinking about having a boat that the two of us could run together, and doing that as a life together. And that's sort of where it all started. And it wasn't really until we got the David B that I started learning about boats. Mm-hmm. And that was this is my first experience with boats.
Yeah. So you originally thought about building a boat to do this.
Yeah.
But then you ended up buying a boat. So tell me about that.
We actually spent a lot of time and a lot of effort trying to create a set of lines and trying to find investors to invest to build something like that.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to build something similar to what they had in Maine, some kind of big schooner.
Yeah.
Probably quite a few passengers, 20-some passengers.
Which is what, $700 to $1 million to build?
Yeah, somewhere in that range. I bet you it's double that.
Is it really? Okay.
At least, depending on how nice you're doing it and how how you do it. But we had decided that we would try to raise money, and we actually did a little stock offering like thing, and had some people who had committed and told us that they would put money into it, and then the .com boom fell apart, and all those people that had originally had a whole bunch of money floating around that they were willing to put into anything that sounded cool, mm-hmm. suddenly decided that they didn't really want to invest in anything. And it definitely was the wrong time to have done it. Had our plan come together 2 years earlier, we'd be sitting here probably on a big schooner instead
mm-hmm.
of on an old boat. Yeah. So after that, we decided that instead of trying to find others to help us with the cost of things and to help us finance it, that we should find something that we could afford to buy outright, and something that needed work to turn it into what we wanted. So we did some shopping, some looking around, and this is one of the first things we actually had found that fit a bunch of the requirements for how big it was, and what we could do aboard it.
So how did you find this boat?
The former owner is sort of an acquaintance of a friend of ours, and that friend said, "Hey, I know this guy that has a couple old boats. Maybe you should go talk to him." And so we went out to Lopez Island, and he had 3 boats he showed us that day, and this was the only one that was really completely for sale at the time, although I'm sure if we'd offered him enough money, any of them would have been for sale. And he was just kind of sitting on them, trying to find somebody who would take them and restore them.
Yeah. Were they in the water? Or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, in north end of Lopez Island at Shoal Bay.
Yeah.
And everything else he's ever had that he tried to find somebody for, I think everything else is probably gone now.
Yeah, because Yakutat
Yakutat
was just destroyed. So.
Yeah, it was cut up. And it's just really hard to find somebody who wants to take on a big project like this.
Yeah,
and
right.
there are a lot of people who are kind of dreamers, and the first couple days seem like a good idea, and then it's hard to convince
more than
yourself.
3 weekends, they don't want to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So what year did you buy the boat?
In 1998.
98.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind me asking how much you paid?
We paid $15,000.
Okay.
And I would bet I don't know what we would have done, but I would bet that the engine as an antique was probably worth about that amount.
Okay.
If you took it out, sold it to an antique engine collector, they probably would have paid somewhere in that range.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, maybe not. But these days, there's certainly engines being sold for that kind of price or more.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is one of the few remaining engines from that manufacturer, from Washington Iron Works, that are still around. So
yeah. So before you tell me about working on the boat, fixing it up for your business, tell me about the history of the boat, if you would.
Well, the boat was built in Lake Washington at the Lake Washington Shipyards, which is in Houghton, which is now Kirkland.
Oh.
And it was built by Libby McNeil Libby, who is who at the time was doing a lot of salmon canning in in Alaska. So they had the boat built because at the time there was a rule that you couldn't fish under power, you could only fish under sail. So what they did is they built boats like the David B, and they were called monkey boats. And they towed all the sailing boats, and they were all 32-foot long sailboats out to the fishing grounds. And so the David B and the boats like them, they tow the sailing boats out to the fishing grounds, and then they would kind of act also as was it a push barge for some of the...
Yeah, they'd also tow barges out and anchor them where the fishing was going on.
Yeah.
So you told me earlier, why is it that they couldn't use motors on the boats to fish with?
Well, it was a rule.
Time.
Yeah, it was a rule, I believe, from National Marine Fisheries, and one of the reasons that I've heard about that they couldn't do that was that the canneries were worried that if you started getting all these boats with engines in it, they would have a lot more people out there getting fish, and then they'd have a kind of a flooded market, so that the price of the fish would go down. So the canneries kind of wanted to keep the fish prices up a little bit, and that was one of the reasons that they weren't allowed to fish under power. But then that all changed in 1951, I think it was, and then then boats could fish under power, and the David B became obsolete, and they brought it up onto the beach, and the boat was actually in Bristol Bay, and it was in Ecock, Alaska, was where the cannery was.
Is that Southeast Alaska?
No, it's more western.
It's Bristol Bay faces towards the Bering Sea, just above the Alaska Peninsula.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, it was brought out onto into a cradle, and it sat there until I think it was 1981.
Wow,
and
for
30 years. And there's this wonderful.
So outdoors.
Outdoors, yeah.
In a cradle.
In a cradle, and you can tell when we got the boat, you could tell which side faced the wind because it was a lot more pitted on one side than the other. Yeah. But there's this wonderful story, and it's one of those stories that I have no idea if it's true or not, but I love to believe it is, that a bunch of the old-timers up there would come down to the boat on the 4th of July and start up the engine every year, and that's the reason that the engine never rusted together or seized up. So we make sure that every year on the 4th of July we're running the engine.
Oh, cool.
So we've done that since we got it.
Yeah, very cool.
But that was pretty nice. And
yeah. So then what happened after 1981?
Well, there's a woman who fishes up there, and she really liked the boat and wanted to bring it down to Idaho. and she lived in Idaho. She wanted to bring it to Idaho, and so she found a company that she could barge it down on, and she made arrangements to barge it down to Seattle. And then last minute, it turned out that she couldn't get it on the barge that she'd originally arranged for, and then I think it was she ended up getting it on another barge. And she brought it down to Seattle, and it sat in Seattle for a long time because her plans changed. I think she got pregnant and was going to raise a family now. So anyhow, the David B sat in Lake Union for a while, and then I've heard it spent some time in Quartermaster Harbor, and then was eventually bought by the person that we bought the boat from, and then eventually us.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Very cool. So then tell me about the engine. It's got the original engine in it, you said?
It's the original engine. It's a Washington S-Step 3-cylinder diesel engine. It has a plaque that came with it, and the plaque says that it was designed to produce 100 horsepower at 325 RPMs, and it spins 50 by 39 three-bladed prop, 1-to-1. When you clutch in and ahead, it's direct all the way out to the prop. There's no gearing or anything.
Oh, wow.
And it shifts with air. It actually has a big air cylinder on there that shifts the engine from a head to a stern. And a lot of the engines from this era were known as direct reverse. Direct reverse meant that you didn't have a gearbox at all, but you could start the engine spinning either direction. And so you would start the engine spinning in ahead to go forwards, and you would stop it, completely stop it. That was neutral, off, and then you would start it spinning in the other direction. And there was a air shifting mechanism that moved the camshaft. So there was a second set of cam lobes for each of the tappets, and so this engine, though, instead of that. This engine actually has a gear, a reverse gear, so you can idle, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
And it's pretty easy to work on. The most common question we get about the engine and working on it is where do you get parts? And what you do is you have them made. There's very little that wears out. It was all designed to be. There are all these oversized bearing surfaces and stuff because it was designed to be long-lasting and to be worked on by people who didn't know much about it. But when something does wear out or something breaks, you take broken pieces to the machine shop, and they measure them and make you a new one of whatever it is.
Really interesting. Yeah. So the boat was built in 1929, 65 feet long, and then you guys bought it in 98, is that what you said?
Yep.
So then when you bought it, how long did you think it would take to get it to where you wanted to be?
This is actually a funny story.
This is a leading question here.
No, it's a very funny story because my estimation was 2 years.
2 years, okay.
And
how
about
much?
2 years into the project, some people asked us about it, and I said, well, I think it's probably about 2 more years. And that continued on to the point that they would ask just as a joke until it basically took 8 years.
It took 8 years, yeah. What did you think, Christine? Originally?
Oh, I believed him that it would take 2 years.
Well, I believed me too.
I had no idea at the time. I knew that he had all this experience with wood boats, and we had a lot of people that we knew who were involved with wooden boats and all that. So when we said this is what we were going to do, they seemed to think it seemed reasonable. But as we kind of started digging into the boat deeper and deeper, it just seemed to have more and more rot in that. So we just kept taking more out to the point where my mom always would say that we didn't actually buy a boat, we bought a pattern for a boat because it was like everything we touched we had to get rid of, and then we had to put a new piece back in. So that was kind of.
So the boat was at Lopez when you bought it. Did you haul it out right away to work on it, or did you work on it there some? Or
we worked on it there. The first, I guess it might have been 6 months that we were.
It was February.
February
we
brought it back.
So that would have been almost 9 months.
Yeah.
So you worked on it there for a while, and then you dry docked it.
Nope. It wasn't until 2004 1995 that we actually went into the shipyard. We did everything at the dock for the first.
Really?
Yep. My idea was, since the boat was already floating and in the water, that it made more sense for us to try to fix the deck and fix everything from the top, so that we would have, so everything down below that would be out of the rainwater and not getting more rot. And it's also expensive to be hauled out, and at the time there wasn't a place here in Bellingham to haul a boat that size.
Really?
There was a shipyard with a railway, but obviously you couldn't spend very long on the railway. So
Yeah.
and that yard had fallen into disrepair. The railway originally had tracks all over the yard that you could sidetrack a boat and move it to a different spot. But by the time we got the David B, that was all in disrepair. So
Oh, okay.
so we kept working on it here at the dock, hoping that we could slowly put our money into it and our time, and when we were ready, then we knew at some point we'd have to do a big shipyard time, but we were gonna wait until we had things sort of better taken care of.
Yeah. So then you took it out.
Yep, in 2004.
2004, December 2004.
Okay. For how long did you have it out of the water?
We were out 6 months,
Oh.
and we did about a quarter of the hull with new planking and all new frames, the length of the boat.
Oh, wow.
We did laminated frames that we built up from about 1/4-inch thick layers. We'd make the whole.
Of Doug fir?
You have Douglas fir.
Yeah.
We'd cut a piece of fir that was the right size and then slice it up into layers, and we'd put epoxy between all the layers and push or pull the thing down into the space between the existing frames. We made a little tool so we could use a come along and pull them all the way down into the area by the keel. And then when the epoxy cured, we had a frame that was the right shape. And we did all that with all new frames before we actually started taking planking off, in hopes that the ceiling planking and the outside planking would hold everything in shape until we had new frames, and then we could take the planking off and plank back onto those new frames.
And did that work okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think over the time we were sitting there, we did lose a little bit of the shape of the boat. It's really hard to know, and we weren't blocked up perfectly for what we were trying to do there, but we're pretty close to what I wanted to do. But that's one of the hardest things, is you haul out, and boats are very soft and flexible when they're wood boats are flexible when they're out, and
I learned all about humping and hogging a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
From the guys that I interviewed, so I didn't have a clue what that was, but I found out about it.
Yeah, it was impressive because the wood on here, a lot of the original stuff was so high quality, the fir that they used. When we haul out and then go back in the water, it almost never has very many leaks when it goes back in. Even when we were out for 6 months, the leaks it had are a couple places where there are butts or something that we can't. A couple places where we can't get to the corking underneath a bilge stringer. A couple places, but pretty much.
So it's Carvel planked with.
Yep. It's 2 1/4 on the outside, and then it's 2 1/2, I think, on the bilge stringer on the inside. And the frames are 3x4.
And all the joints are caulked, or not caulked, but cotton and oakum.
Cotton and oakum.
Yeah.
And I started working on boats in Maine, and so I call that caulking. But out here, they call that same sport is called corking.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Depends on where you're from.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the hardest part of the 8-year rebuild project?
The truth? Yeah, the truth.
Oh, the truth. It took 8 years.
No, not the truth. You want the true
Do I want
answer?
the true answer? Well, I don't know.
The money.
Yeah.
Oh.
The money and the time. When we would have jobs where we had enough time to work on the boat, then we weren't making enough money to buy materials and stuff.
Yeah.
And then the reverse, it's just hard to.
Yeah.
hard to do a project like that and not have something else funding it. Money from the outside funding.
Yeah. So, Christine, did you learn all about woodworking and boats, and you got in there and learned all that stuff, huh?
Oh yeah. I got firsthand experience, and I did took a little woodworking class right at the very beginning of the project, because I realized early on that even though Jeffrey is a very, very good teacher, because we were together, it was very hard for me to learn from Jeffrey, even though he's like probably the best teacher I know. And so I did that, and then that gave me a little bit of a little better understanding, and so I got to do a lot of the same stuff. We made deck beams together. I did a lot
Learned how to operate all the equipment and everything.
Oh yeah,
huh?
yeah. So
very cool.
So while I still don't feel like I'm a great woodworker, I can cut something. I can use the chop saw as well as anybody else, and I can use the skill saw. So I'm comfortable in the shop.
Yeah. So when did you officially finish the boat and put her in the water? And did you have a christening party or anything cool like that, or a whiskey plank party or whatever they call it?
We did do the whiskey plank.
Yeah, we did the whiskey plank, but we also, when we launched out of the shipyard, we didn't have a big party then because we had all these other things that were going on. One of the interesting things was the very next day, I was in the ski to sea race here.
Oh, wow.
And we had to be up and out of here early. And so we spent the whole night, we spent the night on the boat after we launched, just listening to the pumps run here and there occasionally. And just enough that we didn't get much sleep. And then we had that big race the next day. But then later, so we spent another year working on the boat, and then right before we started our very first season with passengers, we had a big launching party where we had about 150 people invited who came down, and almost everybody who was there had helped in some way, and it was a pretty neat event.
Cool. Yeah.
And that was about a month before our season, and at that point everything kind of looked like it was going to look when we were ready to go for real, but it was definitely not done, and we spent a lot of time in that following month working a lot of long days to get ready to...
Was that 2006 then?
Yeah. It was 2006.
Yeah. Okay. So then you officially launched Northwest Navigation, which is your business. So tell me about that. Give me your commercial for why people should come up here and go out on your boat.
Okay. Northwest Navigation was started so that we could carry passengers, because that's what we wanted to do for our living. And we do stuff in the San Juan Islands, so we take people out on trips for like 3-4 day excursions out to islands like Susha, or we go to Roche Harbor, or we just show people around. I really like taking people out. Besides being the cook, I also am the naturalist on board. So one of the things that I love to do is to take people on hikes, and we'll go and we'll look for plants and different and interesting plants. I also like to take people out in the kayaks, especially at low tide, and kind of go along the shoreline and show them some of the critters that live down there. And I've been involved with birding for a number of years, so I love showing people birds, and then I love to come back on the boat and feed them all sorts of great stuff, and I make everything pretty much from scratch on the boat. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's San Juan Islands, and then we also do a couple trips a year where we go up to, or we go do a trip where we go up to Alaska. So we have a 12-day trip that goes between Bellingham and Ketchikan.
Wow.
And this year we're doing something a little bit different than we've ever done before, and we're going to do sort of a learn to cruise, because we had that area, because we had a whole lot of people over the years who we've met who says, oh, I'd love to go that area, but my boat's too small, maybe I'm a little too afraid to do it on my own, and I'd really like to have somebody else show me first. So this year we're kind of doing our to and from Alaska trips as a way to get other people who would like to come on board and maybe learn a little bit more. So it's a little less of a nature cruise and a little bit more of a how to cruise. And then we spend a couple months, June and July, in Alaska. And while we're in Alaska, we do 7-day trips up there. And I like to,
Where people start in Alaska?
They start in Alaska, and they go...
What part of Alaska?
Southeast.
Okay.
And so we do between Petersburg and Juneau. And that, to me, is like the sort of whales, glaciers, and bear area.
Yeah.
And so we do a lot of stuff where we spend time watching mostly humpback whales, some orcas, but there's just tons of humpbacks up there. And then we spend a day where we're up at a Tidewater Glacier. And so we'll go, it's about a 30-mile round trip, 30 miles up and back to the glacier. So we have a nice day where we go up and we watch a glacier calve into the fjord. And it's a kind of a fun day because we get to push up through the ice. It's real slow going.
Really?
So yeah, so Jeffrey's on the pilot house roof because it's easier to see up there, and then I'm down here at the wheel, and we've got the little microphones that we wear, and so they'll tell me, go a little to the left or a little port, a little starboard, head to that thing there, and then I'll do it, take it in gear, take it out of gear. So we go up and look at that, and then we also do a lot of hiking up there, do a lot of kayaking, and then one of my favorite things is when we are kayaking, we get to spend time looking often at bears on the beach, which is how I like to watch bears. I'm in the water, they're on the beach, and so we look for brown bears and black bears up there, and that's fun. So that's what we do when we're doing our trips in the summer.
So how many staterooms are on the boat for guests?
There are 4 staterooms, and we've got 3 of them have queen-size bunks, and then one of them is a cabin that has 2 extra-long twins.
Okay.
And we have, for all of our passengers, each of the cabins have its own toilet and sink, and then up in the forward area we have what we call the shared head, or public head, and that's the one that everybody can use, and it's bigger, it's got a bathtub in it, there's a little fireplace in there, it's also got another toilet too, and so it's the one that everybody uses, and but it's kind of nice for people at night if they don't want to be wandering around the boat to have their own head on in their cabin. So so we have that for our passengers, and then we also have kayaks for our passengers. So we've got 2 doubles, and 3 doubles and 2 singles, and so it's a nice way for us to get off the boat and do other things and paddle around.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, what's your contact information if somebody wants to get a hold of you or go to your website?
If they want to go to the website, it is northwestnavigation.com, and that's spelled out the long way. And then if they want to contact us, probably the best thing is Christine at Northwest Navigation, and that's spelled CHRISTINE at Northwest Navigation.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. And then what's your season for doing because essentially you've got a floating bed and breakfast, right? Yeah. What's the season for that?
We're end of April through middle of October. And and then this year we're going to be part of the Bellingham Bay Rendezvous, which is a 2-day festival that's taking place April 28th and 29th in Fairhaven.
Really? And what is that all about?
Oh, it's sort of a festival that does a spotlight on crude charter boats that are kind of character boats. So it's a lot of the wooden boats. So there's and that takes
is that new?
Place. It's new. Yeah, it started last year. Was its first
year.
You
guys do it last year?
Yeah.
How was it?
It was great.
A lot of participation.
We probably had 1,000 people down there wandering around. And
it was
probably a third of them walked through the boat and looked around.
April 28th to 29th.
April 28th.
You have to write that down.
Yeah, it's at the Bellingham Cruise Terminal.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah, there'll be. I think we've got 11 boats coming right now.
Very cool. I'm going to write that down now.
Oh, do. Yeah.
So I can get up here in a little bit less than an hour. So that's a great place. So Christine, you wrote a book too recently. Tell me about that.
Well, my book is called More Faster Backwards, Rebuilding David B. And it was a project I never thought that I would do. I had 2 of our passengers who are authors come on, and they spent the better part of their trip convincing me that I should write the story of how we rebuilt the boat and then took it to Alaska for the first time. So it's a lot of stories about how we got the boat. It's a lot of the, how we overcame our obstacles, how we worked together as a couple. There's a lot of stories about how we spent a lot of time, we run together, and we spent a lot of time in the trail running and sort of figuring out all these issues that we had to face with rebuilding the boat. And then also, that first trip up to Alaska, what that was like. So there's a lot of stories about going through the Inside Passage and seeing, some of these amazing anchorages for the first time, what it was like to take this totally untested boat up to Alaska. And that was I think it's a good book.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to purchase that, is that on your website or
it is
where
on the
do they
website.
go?
They can go there, and then there's also a website called morefasterbackwards.com that you can buy it, and then it's on Amazon locally. If you're in the Bellingham area, you can get it at Village Books, and then they also have it at Captain's Nautical and Armchair Sailor in Seattle.
Very cool. Very cool. So Jeffrey, I like to ask different questions here. One question that comes to mind is the most interesting passenger you've had on the boat since 2006.
That's kind of different than the normal question we get about the passengers, which is, what's the worst one you've
The
had?
most difficult.
Right.
No,
And
just the most interesting.
For some reason, we haven't had any bad passengers.
That's great.
Yeah, we, and I think it's sort of self-selecting. People know they're going to be with a group, and so the people who are evil don't go on things like that because they know they won't enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
We've had all kinds of interesting people, and it's kind of amazing once you start getting to know people how many stories they have and how many interesting things all these people do, and for some reason then they select us to go on a trip with. We've had one of our first passengers was a lawyer who represents cases in front of the Australian version of our Supreme Court. We've had people that are producers at big theaters. We've had a woman and her 2 grown daughters, and they were very interested in the engine because she had spent a bunch of time driving trucks and buses. We've had it's just the whole range of people. We get a lot of engineers, but we also get a lot of people that don't know at all what they're getting into.
You get a little seasickness out there?
We have had very little of that. The boat's really stable, and we just don't have that very often. Every once in a while there's an issue, but I think probably I could count on my one hand how many times somebody's actually felt ill, and I don't think anybody's actually gotten sick.
No, and most of the time I take all the reservations, and so when people think they might have an issue with that, I kind of say, well, make sure you bring something with you that works for you for motion sickness. And then if they have that, they usually, maybe they take stuff, I don't know, they don't say, but we haven't had anybody who was really sick at any time, because we are in really calm water pretty much the whole time. And
that was my next
even the
question. Are they
Alaska
getting any high seas during your trips at all?
We have occasionally, but we're pretty careful to watch the weather and know what's going on. And I think the people who aren't on boats a lot, and even people who are, they like it when it's calm. It's much more pleasant when you can go somewhere and see a little bit of that kind of stuff. But it's no fun if it's rolling around hard enough that it's hard to get around or whatever. So
yeah. And what's the cruising speed of the boat?
We go 6.5, between 6.5 and 7 knots.
Yeah. So that's a nice pace. You can enjoy, relax, and
you can
see a lot of the scenery, and you're not racing around trying to go 40 miles an hour across the bay.
Trying to get somewhere. It does mean you have to do some planning for where you're going to go, and you can't spend all your time somewhere and then rush home. But
do you anchor out a lot during your trips?
We anchor every single night.
Oh, wow.
And we almost always find some place that's just perfectly calm. I work really hard to find us places that are calm anchorages. It's just no fun to spend all night rolling around listening to the things clink and clank.
Right. So. Very good. Well, I really appreciate your time today. Any parting comments for our listeners? Christine, anything you want to add?
Ooh, I don't know. We'd love to see you.
Yeah, we'd love to see people on the boat.
Okay.
And a big part of of what we do is continuing to preserve this wooden piece of maritime history. And while we can do a lot on our own, it really takes the public going on something like this to pay for it. Their small part of maintaining this restored thing is them going on a trip on it.
Yeah, right. Very cool.
That's what pays for this whole industry to keep on going.
Yeah. Well, very good. Thanks for your time today. I appreciate it, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine and Jeffrey, for taking the time to meet with me a couple weeks ago and do this interview. You guys have a really cool boat, and it's awesome that you're living out your dream. And maybe one of these days I'll get up there and go on a cruise with you. That would be a lot of fun. So the best to you. For my listeners, I would really encourage you to go to their website, northwestnavigation.com. And there is a link on the blog and show notes today on my website. And I would encourage you to take one of their cruises. They go anywhere from a couple days to a week or two up in Alaska. They've got beautiful staterooms. It's really a great way to get away and just do something really different. And they're very fine people. So I would encourage you to do that. Okay, I think that's it for today's show. I would love it if you would connect with me and give me some feedback. You can do that via email, dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. Sign up for my email subscription list, or connect with me on Pinterest, Twitter, or Facebook. Look for Wooden Boat Dan. And I hope you guys have a great week. It's getting to be that time of year here, at least in the Northwest, where the weather should start improving and it'll be a little more easier. Not a little more easier, that's not grammatically correct. It'll be easier to get out on the water because it'll be a little drier and warmer. So I would encourage you to work on that, getting out on the water, and I'm going to continue working on my canoe, and hopefully maybe we'll see you out there on the lake one of these days. So have a great week, and keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Wooden Boat Dan over and out. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.